Good enough or do-over? I struggle with this one. Makers, and maybe you can relate, we tend to be perfectionists. We want things to be exactly as we imagined. Executing it that way is not always possible. There are limits. There are limits in our skills, our knowledge. There's also limits in the tools and technology at our disposal. I want to drill a dead-on hole, but I don't have the best drill press on the planet, far from it. And there's some flex in the quill on my drill press, so that can affect my ability to do things as precise as I would want. The question becomes, where do you draw the line? Where do you say, this is good enough, I'm okay with this, or I gotta scrap it and try again? I wish I had an answer for that. It differs greatly for me depending on what kind of project I'm working on. If it's purely functional and it performs a function, then good is good enough. An example I have here in front of me, this is the jig I built for my router. It's the circle cutting jig. You put a pivot point anywhere along this line, router's attached here, and you can run it and create a really nice circle. It does exactly what it's supposed to. The thing is, it's not exact. I don't know if you can see on camera here, but these two arcs, they don't end at the same point. They're not parallel. This one's higher than this one. And it's noticeable. That's a good 1/4 inch difference. The thing is, it mounts on the router plate just fine. You can't really tell that, and it certainly doesn't affect its function. So it's good enough. Oftentimes in my making, when I'm creating things, I work towards making something look manufactured versus handmade. There's a place for handmade, and handmade is beautiful in many instances. But sometimes in creating something, a maker project, I want it to look like you purchased it somewhere. It's just a goal that I go for. Making frames is a good example. I want my miters to be perfect when I make frames. They rarely are. I make some pretty good ones, and I've worked hard to get my tools dialed in so that I can do that. But it is a challenge to get a great miter. This project that I'm working on in aluminum that I talked about in my video yesterday is an example of where good isn't good enough. What I'm going for is to make something that is really precision made. I can make a wood one of these really quickly. I actually had to make a wood template to end up routing the aluminum to cut it out to shape. So I almost made what normally is made for this application out of wood so that I can make the metal one. That's a lot of work to do something. There's no real reason to do it the way I'm doing it other than to give it a shot to see if I can. And in that instance, I not only want to see if I can, but I want to see how well I can do it. I made a mistake on it yesterday, and it's minor. I don't want to show you because I'm not finished with that build and I want to share that as a complete video, but I'll show you this little template I drew of it. I traced one end of the aluminum cutout I made, and then I traced the one that I messed up on, and it's really small. But when you look at it in the whole, you can see it. And when you put the plate into the table saw deck, I notice it there. It would not affect its function, but that's not what I'm going for on this one. I don't want good, I want great on this one, or as great as I can do, and I can do better. So it's a do-over. There's this old adage, don't let great get in the way of good. And that's this concept, right, where you're so striving for perfection that you don't accept all the good things that you're doing and let those go forward as good enough. Good enough isn't always a compromise. It's about where you end up at the end. If you never end up there because you keep scrapping everything and don't accept good as good enough, it can hamper your ability to continue to create. It can hamper your ability to achieve what you want to achieve. And that's a bad thing. There are many instances where good is good enough. There's a time and place for great, but making that call is one of the personal challenges as makers that we must make day in and day out as we work to create. I wish I had better advice for you on this one. I know that it's a struggle for me, but I also know that being easier on myself sometimes and accepting good when it is good enough is a good feeling too.